Hi guys, and welcome to today's video, which is going to be on funding graduate entry medicine. This is something you can find a reasonable amount of information about when you sort of look online, but I wanted to kind of go into it and break it down and just make it a little bit clearer. And I also want to talk a little bit about things like placement costs and just the upfront costs that perhaps they don't mention. So things like stethoscopes, placement costs, DBS checks. Hopefully this video will be useful. If you have any questions about finance or anything else, please just let me know and I'll try and answer them the best I can. Obviously a lot of this is going to be from my own personal experience, so it might not be 100% applicable to like every single university, but I've tried to make it as general as possible. And also I've included some of the money that I personally get, but I'm a dependent, so that's why the money might seem a little bit low to some people. And obviously if you're independent or if you have children or anything like that, the money will be totally different. So I've just put them in to kind of give you an idea of what I personally get given. And I know for some people that might be in quite a similar situation to myself, then it might be kind of useful. So hopefully it is useful to someone. So just to contextualise this video a little bit, I am a 24-year-old. I finished a degree and then did a year working, and then I'm now obviously at medical school and I'm in my second year. I am under 25, so I still get classed as a dependent by Student Finance England and by the NHS Bursary system. So this will be slightly different to people that are not dependents. So yeah, hopefully this information is useful. So I'm just going to start by talking about the basic way that you fund graduate entry medicine. So this section is just going to be basically talking through all the different tuition loans and maintenance loans available to you, as well as the NHS Bursary. This information will be largely aimed at people that are home students. I'm sorry I don't particularly have information for international students, but hopefully I'll get that sorted soon. All this information is correct at the time that I've recorded this video, and all of it's correct to the best of my knowledge. If there are any things I've got wrong, please feel free to comment them below and I will try and update and change the video. In this video I'm going to discuss how you fund graduate entry year 1, and then I'll discuss years 2, 3 and 4, as they seem to be clumped together and have the same funding system. So first of all, in year 1 there's the tuition fees. The first £3,465 will have to be self-funded. This means that you should be able to start the course knowing that you'll have this money at some point during this first year. Most people tend to save up this money before they start, but some people do use their maintenance loans to pay it off during the year. The remaining £5,535 or £5,785, depending on how much university's tuition fees are in total, is paid by Student Finance. You apply to your local authority, Student Finance England or Student Finance Wales, and you apply to the one of the country which you reside in normally, not the one of the country that you're going to be studying in. So whilst I study in Wales, I applied to Student Finance England and they make up the remaining £5,535 because I study in Wales and my tuition fees are £9,000. Some universities ask for £9,250, so therefore they'll make up whatever the difference is. So whatever your tuition fees are, and I assume this will continue if they change or increase, then the Student Finance will cover the rest of it. There's your maintenance loan. The main thing to take away from this is that graduate entry medicine does get a maintenance loan. So you can get between £3,414 and £11,672, depending on a load of different factors. So some of these factors include if you live at home, what your income is or what your parents' income is, and whether you live in London or not. So in my first year, I got the £3,414 because I was still counted as dependent, so it was based off my parents' income. This money was supposed to pay for my rent, my living costs, and anything else I could need on a day-to-day basis. Years 2, 3 and 4, so your tuition fees, again, there's £3,465, but instead of you paying it in years 2, 3 and 4, this is now paid by the NHS. The NHS funds this and doesn't expect for you to pay it back, so you don't need to worry about that money at all. You do have to apply for your NHS Bursary to do this, and your university will be involved in this process as well. And then again, the remaining amount of money is made up of student finance contributions, which you apply for as normal. Your maintenance loan in second, third and fourth year does reduce from student finance. I couldn't find some exact figures on this, but I personally received just over £2,000, which I assume is probably roughly the minimum, and I know people that get up to £9,000, so I assume that's roughly the maximum. This is obviously a bit of a reduction, but most people will find that it balances out with the money that they get from NHS Bursary, particularly if you are towards the higher end of the spectrum. Everyone also gets a £1,000 non-means tested grant from the NHS. This money is something that you don't have to pay back, obviously, as it's a grant. You get this money regardless of whether you're a dependent or not a dependent, and regardless of parental income or your own personal income. Finally, you'll be asked to apply to the NHS Bursary scheme. This is a means-tested aspect, so some people won't get any money additionally from the NHS beyond the £1,000 in their tuition loans. I personally don't get any money beyond that. They really ask for a lot of different factors to decide upon how much they're going to give you. This depends on things like dependence, whether you're dependent yourself, whether you have children, whether you have a partner. It's also worth just generally noting that this is applied for in the same way as the NHS grant, so everyone has to fill out this form regardless. The NHS Bursary is also how you get things like placement costs reimbursed, so they cover things like travel to placements and any other costs that you incur through completing your normal course. This is unfortunately also only applicable to home students, not international students. International students aren't available to apply to the NHS bursary system, which is a bit of a shame. So I hope that's cleared up how you fund graduate entry medicine. If you have any questions, then of course just direct them my way. You can contact me either via this channel or also on my Instagram, which is Lydia is a gem. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the upfront costs of studying medicine. This is something that I think there's perhaps not that much information about, but I think it's kind of good to know when you're making your plans. And for people that are perhaps getting closer to starting, it's really good to just have an idea of what you might be expected to pay. So first things first, you'll probably have to pay for your own DBS. So your DBS is like your criminal records check. Most universities won't pay this for you. A lot of them ask you to organise it before you start the course. This is because they effectively have no guarantee that you're definitely going to do the course until they get that DBS check back, and so they ask you to pay it. This costs about 60 quid, I think, and it's because you have to do the enhanced version. It's also definitely worth going for the updating version, which is like an extra 11 quid. So then if you do any volunteering while you're at university or anything else, then you've got it and you can just transfer it across. So one of the things you won't have to pay for yourself is the vaccinations. You will be provided with things like hepatitis B, and if there's stocks of it, because there were difficulties with getting stocks when I first started at university. And yeah, any other necessary vaccinations, they'll provide you through occupational health, so you don't need to worry about the cost of that. And in fact, I'd actually recommend don't buy them yourself, because not all universities will refund you, so you know, why pay for the extra thing when you don't have to. Another thing which I guess people want to know about quite often is about stethoscopes. I know a lot of people buy them themselves when they first get into medical school, or they get it bought by friends or family that perhaps are supporting them to get into medical school. But if you haven't, and if you're not planning to get it till you get there, I would definitely say wait until you've done your first week, because at the end of the first week you'll probably get invited by the BMA to some sort of lunch or something, and at the end of that they give you a voucher. This voucher allows you to take 20% off quite a few stethoscopes, which is obviously great, and it also gives you quite a big discount on things like stethoscope bags, which you might be thinking isn't worth buying, but genuinely it is better to kind of protect it than waste 60 quid by accidentally baking it in the sun in your car or something, which you would think people don't do, but actually I do know people that have literally melted theirs in their car. I had someone ask me if I had to buy a lab coat when I first went to Swansea. I personally didn't have to buy a lab coat. My university doesn't do dissection unless it's like an extracurricular. They have lab coats hanging up in the anatomy lab, so every time I've had to wear one, I've literally just used one of theirs. But I think some universities may ask you to buy one, in which case you might need to sort of look into whether they do that. I think particularly if dissection is a big part of your course, they might be more likely to offer it. It's definitely worth checking out and seeing if that's the case for you. I actually had to buy very little else for Swansea really. I didn't buy any textbooks, and most of our stuff comes from lectures, which obviously all the lecturers put online. Most of the textbooks you can kind of access through the BMA, which you'll probably end up being a free member of for at least a year, and they have a massive library of things that you can just download. The only thing which I would say is possibly worth getting is like a textbook on anatomy maybe. A lot of people use the anatomy colouring book, which I've heard is really good. So if you are someone that quite likes like visual stuff, then I would definitely consider getting that, or the classics like Gray's Anatomy or Netter's Anatomy. I actually have the Netter's flashcards for anatomy, which to be fair I haven't really used much, but a lot of people swear by them, so that might be quite useful. Generally though, I'd say don't really bother getting any textbooks. Most places have really good libraries. It's just not going to be necessary, and obviously it will save you money if you don't have to buy them. So the other thing which I get like a reasonable amount of questions about is things like, is it worth buying a car? So I applied to quite a few different universities, as I'm sure you can guess, and different ones probably would have made different amounts of sense for me to get a car. I've ended up at Swansea, as I've mentioned, and that's about 3.5 hours away from my family home. So for me, even just being able to drive back and forth from Swansea to where I live has been really good. I think it is really useful having a car, because when you're on placements and things like that, it's obviously great to be able to just pop in your car and just get to wherever you want to be. Some stuff happens at quite unsociable hours. There's quite a lot of events put on after hours, and there's some very early mornings. So for example, if you do a surgical placement, you'll probably be expected to be in by sort of 7:38. And public transport can obviously be difficult at those times. Also, public transport obviously adds quite a lot of time to your journey, which when you might not have that much time can make quite a big difference. Obviously I know that for everyone buying a car is not practical, So it's obviously very expensive, and the upkeep of having a car is really expensive too. This is the first time I've ever had my own car, so I didn't realise quite how expensive it could be. So I think my insurance now is about £800 because I've never been the named driver before. So obviously that's been quite a big cost, and once you've added road tax and petrol, of course, suddenly it all kind of tots up. So it's definitely worth thinking about like whether you can not only afford the car in the first place, but also whether you can afford the ongoing upkeep. I would say in general, like if you want to have a car and you can afford to have a car, it is definitely a good thing to have. I mean, the convenience of it all has been brilliant for me. I hadn't really realised how expensive petrol is, not because I never used to top up my old car, but just the cost of how much I use it for is really quite staggering, and obviously it makes a big difference compared to my first degree where I didn't have a car. So yeah, it's definitely something worth thinking about. But yeah, if you can afford it, I'd probably say go for it. But loads of people are really like liberal with sharing cars and like sharing lifts and stuff. So, you know, in my year, for example, if someone's going up to one of the hospitals that's a bit further out, then they'll probably post in the group and say I'm going, or people post in the group asking for lifts and people just respond. So people are quite generous, and there's always ways around things. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. So the other thing which I think is worth touching upon is whether people have jobs at uni. People do have jobs, like quite a lot of people obviously need a job to support themselves. I tried having a job briefly in my first year, but just found that I couldn't keep up with everything else personally. A lot of other people are way more organised, or perhaps need the job more, so therefore obviously make themselves more organised. So it's definitely possible. Quite a lot of people end up working as healthcare assistants or healthcare support workers in hospitals or care homes near the uni. So that's definitely an option, particularly if you've done that as part of your work experience for getting into uni. The official party line from the university I think is don't have a job, but I think they know that that's kind of unrealistic. But yeah, people definitely manage it. Also, obviously there's some registered professionals coming onto the course, so people that have perhaps been pharmacists or nurses or PAs in their previous lives, or people that have worked in GP surgeries as managers and stuff like that. So those people do tend to continue their jobs. The only thing I would say about it is that it can be difficult with placements. So for example, at Swansea, we get sent anywhere in Wales for the first 2 years, and a lot of people obviously really want to stay in Swansea because they have a job locally. They try and accommodate these things to the best of their ability, but people also have childcare arrangements, people have mortgages and stuff and family homes. You can definitely have a job, but I'm just saying there are sometimes slight issues that might need to be worked around, and it'd be better if you can definitely get something that's a bit more casual and a bit more flexible. So once I'm back at Swansea, I definitely want to do a video that kind of focuses on how much I actually spend in a week, just to give people a vague idea of like how expensive it can be. I know most of you will be graduates, so you'll have an idea of, you know, what you spent in your first degree, and you might be thinking it's perhaps not that valuable, but obviously I didn't go out as much as I went out in my first degree. My first degree, like some weeks I'd go out 5 nights a week, so there's definitely benefits to perhaps sharing this information with you guys, just to give you a vague idea. So I also asked you guys if you wanted to send in any questions to do so. One of the first questions I got was actually about how do you make money while you're on a GEM course. So there's a few different ways you can go about this. The most common way, which I think most people do at some point, is they work as a healthcare assistant. Some people work in the hospital, some people work in the nursing homes that are sort of local, but either way it's a really good way to make money, and obviously it's good experience for what you're going on to do as a healthcare student. Another really good thing to do is to work as a student ambassador. There's loads of open days for the medical courses because they really try to promote these to the general public, so there's loads of opportunities to get involved in that. The pay is usually pretty good, and obviously it's quite flexible around university times. There's quite a lot of things to do with teddy bear hospitals as well, and a lot of universities pay their students to do that. So that's a really good opportunity. The other thing which is definitely worth exploring is campus jobs. So at Swansea there's lots of different jobs that you can do on campus, such as working in the bars, there's cafes, there's also a cost cutter on site. All of these are always looking for people to work, and because we have longer term times it means that we're around a lot more often, and so people definitely find it easier to get jobs than sort of the average undergraduate. So that's a really good thing to look into. Another thing which I think people perhaps don't think of so much is tutoring. Tutoring is a really easy thing to do. A lot of people like the fact that you're a medical student, and so will be much more willing to probably pay you better and also just give you more work. There's loads of different websites that you can do this on. If you just Google tutoring, then you can usually find it. And a lot of people just generally get approached about it, so there's loads of opportunities. The other thing which, again, a lot of people here will have sat like the UKCAT, the GAMSAT, the BMAT, and particularly for things like the UKCAT you might have used something like Medify. Medify actually got in touch with me about 6 months after I sat the UKCAT and asked me if I wanted to write questions for them. I took them up on this offer and wrote some questions, and that was quite a good way of earning just a little bit of money. If you did well, it's obviously a really easy thing to do. I wrote mainly questions for the quantitative part of it, because I found that section quite easy, and so coming up with the questions wasn't too difficult for me. So another question which I got was about managing money as a medical student. I know a lot of you that are watching this video have probably been students before now, and so have a good idea of how to manage your money. I obviously had to think about how to make the money spread a little bit further, because in my first degree I only studied for 24 weeks a year, whereas in this degree we study for 45. So I really had to work out how to deal with less money and more time. The way that I mainly go about this is that I have 2 bank accounts. So I have my Santander, which I get my money paid into, and then I actually have a Monzo card, and with my Monzo card I use that to do my like day-to-day budgeting, which is a much better system because then the money's just there, and I plan out all my money that's supposed to be coming in and out of my account before the week actually starts, which is a really good way of doing it, because then I don't overspend. I used to find that sometimes I'd spend the money that I should be paying on bills because I would forget that I was having something coming out of my account that week. So I kind of like predetermine it out of my budget. Another thing that I think works particularly well, and which people perhaps don't think about, is let's say you have a £60 worth of money per week based on your student loan. I like to set my budget as sort of £10 to £15 underneath that. You're obviously going to overspend at times, that's inevitable. There's going to be costs that come up that you perhaps didn't realise were going to come up. There's going to be things you want to go and do that, you know, you'd like to have that little bit of extra money for. So I always try to under budget, because then I've always got that little bit of a backup, and that's been really good because I've had quite a few expenses this year that perhaps I haven't sort of planned for. So things like I'm going to my friend's hen do and then her wedding, which I'm really excited about. And so obviously the cost of that has added a little bit. I want to go and visit friends. I've got a friend that lives abroad that I really want to go and see. So all these things I'm trying to save up a little bit of money for. The one other thing I do is I actually put my NHS money aside. So because I get my money in from student finance, I use that to sort of pay my week to week things that I need to buy, and then I just put my NHS money straight into a savings account. I only get £80 a month off the NHS, so it's not like a big amount of money, so it's not enough to sort of really feel it, but it's enough that I then have this little buffer for the really good things that I want to go and do, which is always really nice. So another question I got, and I think this is quite a well-known thing, is that there's quite a big drop in the funding that you get from first year to second year. I've mentioned that in this video obviously. I'd like to say that for some people there won't be a dramatic drop. Like particularly if you get sort of towards the higher end of the student finance loan, you'll actually find it's probably roughly the same. I think it does tend to be people that are sort of more dependents and things like that struggle a little bit more. So I think mine got cut by quite a bigger percentage than probably people that are on the sort of higher ends did. It's not ideal when you get your money cut when the course is just getting harder and you know, you've probably used up quite a bit of your savings perhaps at this point. I did try and save some of the money that I had from first year. That obviously didn't go particularly well because I wanted to do stuff over the summer between first and second year. So yeah, it definitely was a bit challenging. Again, I'd love to reiterate the importance of having saved up some money before you start the course. I know I've been going on about it, but genuinely, when people send me these messages asking me like what's the best way to prepare to start a medical course, literally all I say is just save up some money. You will not regret spending that extra time doing a few more shifts and working a little bit harder just to get a little bit more money. But if you try and learn anatomy before you start, you're not going to remember any of it. So honestly, I'd prioritise that. That is my like #1 piece of advice that I give to every single person I've ever met that's starting graduate entry medicine. The other thing is, and I know this is kind of easy for me to say because I do luckily have the sort of financial backing of my parents if I get myself into a difficult situation, but you will make it work. Like if that's the money you've got, you'll obviously have to budget a certain way. You know, even though I'm on the minimum, I still have like the equivalent of sort of like 40 quid off student loan a week. So it's doable. You know, there's things I'd like to do that I can't afford to do, and that's kind of fine because I know that one day when I'm a doctor, hopefully I'll be earning a little bit more money. So, you know, it's not ideal, but remember it's in the short term and it's student life, which I know is not probably appealing to people that are maybe a little bit older than me, but you have to kind of make it work. So one person asked me about if I'd had any unexpected costs once I'd been at university that had sort of taken a real hit on my finances. Yeah, the one thing that I think I hadn't quite realised is that the 3.5 grand that I'd sort of saved and put aside, it's very easy to accidentally spend that money and then find yourself a little bit short. Obviously I managed to pay all my tuition fees fine because I found the money elsewhere kind of thing, but yeah, it is actually a really big financial burden, and I think 3,500 sounds like quite a lot to me, but it might not to other people. But definitely don't underestimate that you need to have that money ready to go, and if you can have that money saved up before you start, it's obviously just one less thing to worry about once you're there. And I personally think anything you can do to sort of reduce the amount of stress you're going to have once you start is so worth being able to do. I don't really think there's too many other sort of upfront costs that took me by surprise. I've tried to lay out some of the upfront costs that you might have in this video, so hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea. I would like to say that most universities do have like hardship funds, so if you do get to university and find that there's some horrible thing that's come up that you weren't expecting, whilst they're not the most easy to access, there are ways that you can get funding. This won't count for things like if you can't pay your tuition fee or something, because they will have expected you to have that money up front and ready to go. But yeah, there's definitely ways to be helped, so don't panic too much. People will try and help you, and also the medical school is quite helpful. So certainly at Swansea, I actually got quite a few letters saying that my tuition fees hadn't been paid. It was a problem with the direct debit and they basically weren't able to take it, and so therefore they thought that I was like defaulting on my payment, to which I wasn't, and I was getting all these emails saying we're going to kick you out, and the med school basically emailed them and was just like, leave it, like leave her alone for a bit. Which was really good because it was obviously a little bit stressful and it was quite near to exam time that I got all these emails. So yeah, most med schools are quite helpful about finances and stuff, so don't worry too much. One of the other things that sort of came to mind when I saw this question was the impact of the upfront travel costs. So personally, I didn't actually have to travel too far for any of my placements last year, apart from to Aberystwyth, but you know, it's quite a lot of money that you have to sort of pay up front, and it does take sometimes a really long time to get that money back. So I'm currently waiting for a payment of about £100 from the NHS Bursary. I know £100 isn't like the end of the world, but I could also really do without £100. Particularly when you have placements that are at the end of terms, you might be running a bit low on funds anyway. So when I went to Aberystwyth last year, I was riding way into my overdraft and sort of had to call my parents to bail me out a little bit. So yeah, I think the sort of upfront costs of travel and things like that are things that you don't sort of appreciate. So I actually had a question asking about the Isle of Man and what their funding situation was. Their funding situation is basically the same as any other Scottish student. So all the information that's available in this video will be roughly the same for them. So hopefully that answers your question a bit. So finally I got a question about the NHS Bursary. I think this question was like a semi-joke, it's from a friend of mine, but yeah, how to apply for the NHS Bursary. The thing which I think they don't tell you before you start is that you need so much documentation to apply for the NHS Bursary, particularly if you're going for the means tested aspect. Mine got rejected twice and I didn't even go for the means tested aspect, so it's definitely worth making sure you have all the documents in place before you start. So keep all your P45s, P60s, any financial documents that you've had in the years leading up to medicine, sort of for at least about 3 years beforehand. Keep hold of those documents, keep them safe, and make sure you bring them with you to university, because they ask for ridiculous things. Like I know people that got asked for their brother's birth certificates and things like that. It makes no sense. So make sure you have as much documentation as you physically can. Also, if you decide that you don't even want to go for the means tested, because everyone can apply for the means tested, but obviously if your parents earn over a certain amount and you're a dependent, you're not going to get anything. So I made the decision to not bother even applying for it, and if you do that, just say that they refuse to offer their salary up, so say that they're refusing to disclose, and then it just bypasses that completely. Final thing, as with all these things, do it early, just get on with it. I'm the queen of procrastination, as I'm sure many of us are. I love leaving things to the last minute, but it meant I didn't get paid my bursary until about December, which wasn't so bad on the money front, because like I said, I only get £80 a month, but they pay a £30 tuition fees, and that bit then again got harassed with loads of emails saying you haven't paid your tuition fees, so do it early. So I'm sorry this video has been a bit focused on home students. I don't know much about the international system, if I'm completely honest. I really wish I did, and I might try and rope one of my friends in who is an international student into perhaps talking a little bit about it, because I know for some people that would be really useful. But yeah, I just don't personally have that information available to me at the moment. The final thing I really want to say about money is, I know it's like the most stressful part really, particularly if you've gone from a working background to then going back to being a student again, but honestly just like try not to stress about it too much. It will all work out, you'll quickly know what your situation is and you'll be able to sort it. And there are ways that you can get help and support. I'm also going to link, there are a few sort of scholarships available, particularly to people from slightly disadvantaged backgrounds and things like that. So I will link those below so that you guys can have a look at them and see if any of those can help you out. So I hope this video on finance has been somewhat helpful. I know some of this information is already out there from a million and one other sources, but I kind of wanted to give it a more personal touch just so you could have an idea of what it's like actually being a GEM student and living on these sort of costs. I particularly hope that it's been helpful perhaps hearing about some of the additional costs and things like weighing in on whether you should have a car or not. Thing is, at the end of the day, you're obviously going to make your own decisions, and sometimes you might find that things change and so you have to adapt a little bit, and that's fine. So a lot of people perhaps don't come to university with a car and then get one halfway through, and you know, if that works for you, then go for it. but I wouldn't worry too much. There's definitely a lot of support available, and I would definitely try and get a follow-up with an international student, perhaps explaining a little bit about the cost for international students. So hopefully this has been helpful. Thank you so much for watching.